Let's bring in Rami Khoury, who's a distinguished public policy fellow at the American University of Beirut, joins us now from Boston in the United States. Rami, good to have you with us. So we have the Israeli government ratifying the Gaza ceasefire and hostage return deal. The question is, how fragile is it?
It's fragile, like all of these deals, whether it's in Lebanon with Hezbollah or Gaza with Hamas. They're doable as long as both sides get something that's really important for them. They're not going to get what they want through unilateral military action. Neither side is going to get what they want unilaterally. But a negotiation will give them both what they want. The Israelis want the hostages back, and they don't want to be attacked again by Hamas with its advanced missiles and other technology. And the Hamas and the Palestinians want the Israelis to stop attacking them now and in the future, and ultimately also to get the prisoners, thousands and thousands of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, want them out, and also they want to have guarantees that that Gaza and Palestine are safe from military attack. That's more difficult, but ultimately they'd probably want to try to have a negotiated permanent agreement so that neither side has to worry about attacking the other or being attacked. That's way down the road. So, but I think it's going to hold because at least phase one, this is the danger that they do phase one, they release something like 33 Israeli prisoners or hostages, and then the phase two may be delayed or may not happen. There's just too many delicate elements in this process, and as long as both sides agree to the text, it should go well. If they start asking for other demands, which the Israelis tend to do more than Hamas, then that's where you get into problems.
What is your sense about what finally pushed this over the line? Because this was a deal that was put forward by the Biden administration back in May, wasn't it? And as we've just been hearing from Shia Ratanzi, our correspondent in Washington, D.C., both camps, both the Trump and the Biden camp, are claiming, it was them that did this.
Well, I think there's two things that pushed them. The first is the pressure from Trump. That was pretty clear. The second, and these are equal weight elements. The second was that they weren't getting anywhere with their military onslaught, even the genocidal total destruction of human life capabilities in Gaza. Astounding criminal behavior, inhuman, cruel behavior, but it wasn't achieving their goals. They weren't getting the hostages, and they were not getting surrender from Hamas. They were not destroying Hamas. They were not assuring that Hamas or people like Hamas with the same views would not be involved in governing Gaza in the future after the war. So they were failing on all their fronts, and they were slowly being turned into an international pariah. Government officials, soldiers, other people who were involved, high-tech people who were contributing to the Israeli military, they were all afraid to travel because they might be arrested and go to the International Criminal Court. So there was a huge popular upsurge in protests across the United States and much of Europe and all of the global South virtually. So the Israelis realized they had done as much as they could militarily, despite their immense power and the total support of Genocide Joe and gunslinger Kamala Harris. They couldn't achieve anything else, and that's, I think, why it worked.
Far-right elements of Benjamin Netanyahu's government say, well, we've got to go back to war after phase one of the ceasefire agreement. How much potential is there for that to happen, do you think?
There is potential, but I don't think it's great because they're not going to achieve much more than they've achieved. So phase one, there'll be the hostages, 33, I think 32 will be released. And then the Israeli army military personnel are the last ones to be released. And the Israelis want them out. They want them all out. So I think they're not going to go to war after phase one. But it's possible that some people will provoke a renewal of fighting. Political pressures internally in Israel. It's very hard to tell. The Israeli public is a very mixed group. They all want the hostages back. They all support the war. Almost all Israelis support the genocidal Israeli war in Gaza. But at the same time, they realize that they're suffering. They're running to their shelters every other day, and the north has been vacated. Most international airlines are not flying into Tel Aviv. So the Israelis are deeply stressed politically, logistically, emotionally, psychologically, economically, diplomatically. And in every realm of life, Israel has paid a big price, but they thought it was worth it to assert their dominance, their imperial dominance over the entire Arab region and Iran, they think. But that hasn't happened. And this is what's troubling for them. Hamas is still fighting. Hezbollah is able to fight. The Ansarullah and Yemen are pushing back. They're not going to defeat Israel militarily, but that's not how these kind of wars happen. When a colonial power is subjugating indigenous peoples and their supporters, the fight is not missile versus missile. And this is what troubles the Israelis. They can't get Hezbollah, Hamas, Ansarullah, or others to just surrender. And that's what they want. And that's what Netanyahu promised his people, that we will finish them off for good. They'll never be a threat. And he can't do it. So they've got to explore other opportunities. And this is where Trump comes in and says, look, fellas, you've got to stop this war because it's going to be Trump's war after January 20. And he can't have that kind of problem to deal with because he doesn't understand it. He's not interested in it. He's not going to get any hotels out of it or his son-in-law, as they've done before. So they have to really start thinking about the Americans have to start thinking about new strategies. Most of the Trump people who've been appointed are right-wing extremists. Some of them are Christian fundamentalist zealots who are not really well informed about the region, but passionate about giving Israel anything it wants. Many of them want the maximum pressure again on Iran, which hasn't worked, has in fact pushed Iran closer to full enrichment and uranium and nuclear capability.
So what about for Benjamin Netanyahu himself? What are the implications for him and his position, given the far-right support that he relies on could be fracturing?
He can survive if Ben-Gvir leaves the coalition. He's got, I think, 6 votes now over the minimum needed. If he loses Ben-Gvir's 4 votes, he'll have two seats. So he can do without Ben-Gvir if he has to. Other people said they would come and step in and work with Netanyahu. So I don't think there's a fear that the whole deal would collapse because he could not get support in the cabinet or the Knesset. I think that probably is going to happen. He wouldn't have done it if he thought it couldn't be done. But there is a big question of whether the current right-wing, fanatical, militant, messianic, cruel, and genocidal approach of the right-wing parties in Israel who are so powerful now in this coalition, it's not clear if that's going to continue. If this is a long-term shift in Jewish thinking among the majority of Israeli people, or if this is a short-term reaction to various pressures, population, demographic changes within Israel, all kinds of factors come into play. You've seen the same thing in the United States with the growth of the Trump MAGA movement. You see it in parts of Europe. Populations shift to the right, then they go back to the center. And we don't know if the right-wing extremist shift in Israel is a dominant factor in the whole population or is a short-term factor that has been exploited by these people like Ben-Gvir because it allows them to share in the decision-making. The right-wing shift has been going on since Begin was elected prime minister back in the late 70s. And it's been happening steadily. The center and left have pretty much cratered. But the vast majority of Israelis are not right-wing, messianic, militant, genocidal fanatics. The reaction to the support for the war in Gaza was because of the shock of the October 7 attack. It wasn't because the majority of Israelis had suddenly become fascist genocide supporters. But we don't know where the center is going to settle in Israel. And this is a fascinating thing. If the United States and Europeans and others come in and play a positive role, decisive, dynamic role in putting the Israelis at ease, that they will be secure. They don't have to do more genocides. They don't have to attack Iran. There's other ways to assure security, which is through diplomacy. And it's not clear now that Trump is going to do this. My suspicion is that there's a big chance that Trump will, at one point, if he's given a real serious, feasible offer of a permanent negotiated peace, not just between Palestine and Israel, but between all the Arabs and Israel, which has been there on the table, the Arab peace plan, but also with Iran. And this is really the big opportunity, which I believe has to be seized, to have a really serious grand bargain between Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Hezbollah, the Palestinian. All of these are conflicts that can be resolved. None of these are acts of God or acts of nature. They're all conflicts that came about because vicious, ambitious, cruel people carried out policies in Arab countries, in Israel, in the United States, and other places.
So what about on the other side of things? Sorry, Rami, on the other side of things, certainly as far as Hamas is concerned, what are the implications of this deal for them going forwards?
I believe Hamas, the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank now, the Palestinians have suffered immensely, way more than the Israelis have, in material human terms, of the destruction of Gaza. But the Israelis have suffered politically more. They've paid a bigger political price. I just mentioned before all the different domestic and international and other elements. And therefore, Hamas feels that it has achieved something significant. Releasing the prisoners is an important thing for them. Getting the Israelis out of Gaza permanently and not attacking again is an important thing for them. So Hamas quietly feels that it hasn't won, but it has gained some important political power and stature and credibility more than it had before. It's a heavy price that was paid. But no colonial situation has ever been resolved. Nobody has ever been decolonized without paying a heavy price. The Americans did it when they fought the British, the French and the Algerians and the French and the British and the Indians and the Kenyans. And no colonial power has ever been thrown out of a colonial situation without the colonized people paying a big price because of the difference in military and economic power. But in the end, decolonization happens when the colonizer realizes that they just can't keep doing what they're doing. South Africa is a great example as well. So Hamas is feeling it has assets, political assets now. It has popularity that has suffered at one level with Palestinians, but remains strong at another level.
I was going to say, actually, that's an important point, isn't it? Sorry to jump in there, but what about support now for Hamas amongst Palestinians? How has that been impacted by everything that's happened? Hamas never had majority support. It won the election in, 2006, I think? Yeah.
They won the parliamentary election. They didn't get majority vote. They got, I think, 38% or something, but they were the plurality, and therefore they headed the government that was formed. And they didn't want to run Gaza. They went to the Fatah and the West Bank and said, let's have a unified government, which they did for a while. But they've always had a strong core of support because of their two factors. First, they adhere to the whole Palestinian national political program of ending the occupation, creating a Palestinian state, resolving the refugee issue, all of these basic issues of ending Palestinian refugeehood and disenfranchisement, which requires a state. And all Palestinians agreed on this it was started with a document the prisoners Palestinian prisoners in jail had agreed to about 15 years ago or so, I think. And Hamas always stuck to that national program. The other reason people supported them is they're the only people who actually fought back against the Israelis, knowing that military attacks are not going to destroy Israel, but it was such a powerful symbol of resistance that we're not going to disappear, we're not going to surrender, we're going to do what we can. And of course, the October 7 attack wasn't designed to be as big as it was designed to essentially capture maybe 100 Israeli soldiers, take them prisoners, and then trade them take them hostage or prisoners, and then trade them for the Palestinian about 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, which is going on now. The negotiations still are talking about who's going to be released out of those Palestinians. So the Hamas's fortunes go up and down, but they've always been able to count on about 20, 30% of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. Their fortunes went up a little bit after the October 7 attack. After a while, with the Israeli genocide, their fortunes went down. My guess is they will rise in the next poll that comes about. But the suffering of the Palestinians is so intense, so widespread, so deep now, and people will feel this more as they if hopefully they get a chance without being attacked. And with massive development aid coming in, they'll get a chance to rebuild their lives. How are they going to rebuild Gaza? Well, they're not the only people in the world who've rebuilt after massive damage. It happened in a lot of places in World War II. It happened in the Civil War in the United States. It happened in many wars around the world. In Lebanon, it's happened. So this is not a unique situation.
Yeah, reconstruction very much part of the next phase. Rami, we're going to leave it there for the moment, but do appreciate your perspective speaking to us there. Rami Khouri, thank you very much indeed speaking to us from Boston.
Thanks for having me.